Friends, and welcome back. I'm going to be talking about chapter 15 in this video, and we will be talking about delivering your speech. The last recording was about how to create your speech, and again, I'll give you a sample outline, but this is delivering your speech. This is all of the nonverbal elements that we want to be thinking about. And I will tell you, it's helpful if you put a lot of thought into this before the day of the speech, but then when you start delivering the speech, the focus really needs to be on the audience and using your outline as a tool. If you've thought about the things we're going to talk about now in advance, and then you focus on your audience and use your outline during, you will find that a lot of your nonverbals will just fall into place. And you'll hopefully find that your anxiety is lessened. Most of us are anxious about giving speeches, so it's okay to kind of settle into that and then move through it very quickly, which I find as soon as you can focus on your audience, the anxiety lessens very quickly. And that again is the reason we take so much time to prepare for this speech, because if you are prepared and then you tune into the audience, you don't have to be anxious. Okay, so again, we're going to focus today on the delivery. We'll talk about different delivery modes, just so that you are aware of those, how to manage your speech delivery in person, but then also in online environments, and then also how to choose and use visual aids. Alrighty, so for speech delivery modes, we have a few different types of speeches, and I'll explain which one we're using. There is a speech type or mode called impromptu, and that happens, I would say, fairly regularly, maybe at work. That's when you don't have a lot of time to prepare, let's say, an outline, but you're asked to speak on a topic. Even when that happens, you're asked to speak impromptu, in an impromptu method, you still can be prepared. The speech preparation process we're going through for this class will teach you what goes in an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And so even if you're put on the spot, let's say at work, and somebody says, hey, can you talk a little bit about this new project or process? You can still format in your brain, okay, I should still have a good introduction, body, and conclusion, even if you didn't know that you were going to be speaking that day. Manuscript speaking is when you are reading or memorizing something. We won't be doing this type of speech either, because the reading of a speech, as you can imagine, creates a disconnect, I think, between you and the audience. Either especially if you're looking down at note cards or a whole essay that you've written, when you look down, you change all of your nonverbal communication. Obviously, there's less eye contact. It's harder to hear you because your volume is projected down. Typically, when we read, our rate tends to speed up and makes it more difficult to understand. And I also don't love memorizing, because should you forget even one word, sometimes that can throw people off and then they can lose the whole rest of their speech. So we're going to use, and most speech classes would encourage you to use the extemporaneous speaking mode, which means you have an outline which will guide you, but then you speak freely about what you know. So I will show you guys an outline that barely just has placeholders of key terms and short phrases. You'll replace your information throughout the outline, and that allows you to be a much more free, because you can kind of glance down, look at where you are, and then pop back up with your eye contact and engage with the people around you or virtually. So that's why we're using an outline, and that's why I do not want you guys to use note cards. You won't be writing or reading an essay. If you did those things, you'll notice your grade is impacted negatively, because, as I mentioned, those two styles negatively impact your nonverbal delivery. Okay. So in speaking of your nonverbals, we talked about all of these elements earlier on in other videos. And as I said, if you plan your content really well and you think through these things, in these items or variables in advance, your delivery will go really well. For example, if you are naturally soft-spoken and you start thinking about that now, on speech day, you don't have to worry about if people can hear you, because you've started improving your volume over the course of time leading up to the speech. Let's say rate. Again, We naturally have a conversational rate, which is the speed at which we're talking. So we really don't have to work on that. If you actually use the outline and you have prepared so you know your information, the rate will take care of itself typically. Same with pitch and tone. We generally don't have to try to have a different pitch or a different tone. If we're prepared, those kind of work themselves out. Pronunciation is helpful. Again, if there are key terms that you either struggle with or you think other people could struggle with, be sure to practice them in advance. And as a side note, be sure to look up any key terms you don't fully understand before you share them. What we don't want to do during a speech is say, oh, and I'm going to give you this term, and then you pronounce it incorrectly or describe it incorrectly, because then you lose some credibility with the audience. So be sure, there are apps now, I think it's Google Pronounce, where you can, say, what does this word mean? I can't think of a word I've had with students that are commonly spoken, but must have been new for them and they didn't practice them or look them up. So they came out incorrectly and then it caused some confusion for folks. Things like vocal pauses and fillers are the ums, uhs, you knows. And with students, I get a lot of likes. So it's like every fifth word. As a transition, an example would be, so it's like you're working through something like, and then like you go through that thing and then like you don't want to be doing that thing anymore. So like you're just stuck. That's a lot of likes. Try to pay attention if you are using that many likes or ums or uhs. And again, we talked about practicing. That's when you will learn if you are using those pauses and fillers. Fixing them on the day before or sometime before the speech is the time to do it. Once you're in the middle of the speech, again, the job is to use the tool, which is the outline, and focus on the audience. Things, if you do those things like eye contact, facial expressions, gestures, and posture, those should take care of themselves. You see movement here. I don't recommend what looks like pacing because it ends up looking like pacing. However, if we were in a classroom and we had the podium at the front and you knew your outline pretty well, you should have some freedom to move around the classroom and then only come back to your podium when you need to be sure you know the next main point, or if you're going to cite something specific from your outline. But those things should come naturally. Adaptive gestures, which would be things that, I do see sometimes people twirling their hair if they're nervous, or playing with jewelry, or keys. I recommend don't have keys or change in your pockets on speech day. If this is especially in person, but certainly virtual could be the same, because if you are nervous and you start fidgeting, those things are going to make noise. So don't have, for example, a clicky pen with you also, because some people tend to do this a lot and you can probably hear it. It's annoying, but also distracting. As I say here at the bottom of the slide, practice using your outline helps take care of all of this. The last thing on this slide is in terms of delivery, and I think we talked about this in the previous chapter as well. You want to be mindful of your own appearance and the appearance of your environment. And this carries over into the discussion on visual aids, because remember, everything communicates. So on speech day, unless it's directly related to your topic, you don't want to wear tank tops. You don't want to wear shorts. You don't want to wear flip-flops. You don't want to wear, again, anything sleeveless, certainly no hats. You want to dress in a way that supports your credibility for your topic. Obviously, virtually, you don't know if I'm wearing shorts or flip-flops right now, and that's fine. But I'm sharing those things because most of you are going to give speeches in person. And those kinds of things just can take away from credibility. Be sure you're well groomed. Sometimes with men, if they have a lot of facial hair, sometimes that needs to be groomed. Or with women, maybe they need to tone down makeup. Same as these things are also true with an interview. You want to dress in a way, again, that fits the topic and situation, as well as the audience. So consider that. Things like a lot of jewelry could be distracting. All right, so we want to minimize, and all of our choices from our dress and appearance to our physical environment should add value instead of take away or detract from the message. So we'll talk about more about the environment in just a minute. If you do need to give a speech virtually, you do want to make sure the camera is adjusted properly. At the very least, we should be able to see your whole face, ideally at least a little bit of your shoulders as well. Ideally, you would have pretty close to even eye contact. You wouldn't have your face way up here looking down, or one of the things where we can tell like you're totally leaned back. You want to make sure that there's a clear focus, and you want to make sure again that your background is free of distractions. In this virtual world we're living in with so much time being virtual, it's hard to minimize sound distractions. Like earlier, I was recording something and a garbage truck went by. It's not a lot I can do about that because I can't mute in the middle of a recording. Otherwise, you wouldn't hear anything and there'd be no point. Or we have pets or kids that sometimes come into the shot. What we're talking about here would be just minimize the things you can. Even things like I notice students will have lots of things happening in their background. Try to find a space that's free of what could be thought of, not necessarily as clutter, but a lot of images coming at us. Certainly, if you have a fan in the background, consider that that usually causes shadows, so that can be distracting too to an audience member if you're presenting virtually. And then also, if you're not familiar presenting, be sure to test your technology first. Test how to share documents, what things are going to look like, where you should position yourself, so that on the day of the presentation, especially if it's an interview, you're not just then thinking about those things. When we think about presentation aids, those are tools that should be used to support and reinforce your verbal message. Again, they should be directly tied to the topic or the main point at the time you're sharing the visual aid. You can use things that you create. Obviously, there's a list here. You can have physical objects, you can have posters, videos, you could use PowerPoint handouts. In the PowerPoints I've given you for our class, I've tried to demonstrate, unless I called your attention to something that doesn't work well, I'm demonstrating what could work if you were going to create a PowerPoint. You'll notice there aren't a lot of images throughout. You could have an image here or there, but more is not better when it comes to filling up slides. It just is too much and it becomes distracting. If you use a physical object in a speech, be sure, whether it's virtual or in person, that it's large enough for people to see, and it, again, directly relates to your topic. For our speech, because you're going to be, or if you're delivering a speech virtually, you want to be sure, like let's say I was going to use my phone for something. I would only use my phone if it served a purpose for my particular topic. In this case, you could show us a picture on your phone, but you're really going to have to then put the phone in front of your face probably to make sure that it's large enough for us to be able to see. Okay, so just consider that it is a very small space that you're working with when you use your phone. So plan your visual aids accordingly. I personally suggest maybe printing something and then holding that up for the camera so that it's a little bit larger. But if you can't print and you need to show it on your phone, that's fine. Or if you have a physical object, that's fine too. But even this isn't large enough. I really have to bring it into the camera to make sure you guys can see whatever's important about this object. Okay. In thinking about your your visual aids, again, you want to think about how much time do I have? For example, if you have a four minutes to give your speech and we're in a classroom that's kind of big, you might have to have two pictures that you can hand out to either side of the class so that in 4 minutes they can get all the way across the room. You have to account for you physically figuring out if you're going to hand out the visual aid. Is somebody going to do that for you? How are you going to get them back? If you wrote on the whiteboard, when are you going to set up what you're writing? Because that will impact your timing of your speech. You need to be sure to wipe off the whiteboard if that's what you're using as your visual aid. Just put thought into what you create if you're going to create something, or what you use, how and when, right? Just be sure you're managing it. And then as a side note with PowerPoints, one of the great things, what I'm doing now is I have obviously the PowerPoint pulled up, but I'm trying to look at the camera as much as possible more than the slides. And it's pretty easy to do because even if I look down a little bit, you can still, my eyes are still towards you. what I used to see a lot when people would have PowerPoints in a classroom or in the workspace, which always drives me crazy. They'd have the PowerPoint behind them, and then they would start talking to the PowerPoint and pointing at the PowerPoint, which is away from the audience. So now my back is turned, and as you could tell probably from my audio, you couldn't hear me as well. The volume changed because I wasn't even facing you. So that's what the note here is that says, practice using the visual while you're facing the audience. Don't let the visual try to be your presentation. It's just meant to support your presentation, not be the presentation. And I have a handout that I'll put in the assignment for you so that you can use that as well. I would say keep that because, again, there may not be another time when anybody else talks to you about how to create speeches or use visual aids. So again, today we've talked about the speech delivery modes, how to manage your speech delivery, whether it's in person or virtually, and then how to choose and also use visual aids. I hope this was helpful for you guys. If you watched this and you found it at all helpful, please let me know. That'd be great. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing your incoming speeches really soon. Bye, everybody.